evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar organized by CUTS, South Asia in a Perpetual Conundrum, Navigating Challenges in a Shifting Landscape. I'm your moderator for the discussion on the region's complex geopolitical, geoeconomic, and security dynamics. South Asia is a vibrant yet volatile region where historical ties and modern rivalries collide and are amplified by global power plays. The very recent India-Pakistan crisis, triggered by the tragic Pahalgam attack, exposed a new reality. India's Operation Sindoor and Pakistan's Operation Bunyan Marsus were near skirmishes. They showcased a high-tempo, multi-domain conflict spanning air, cyber, space, and narrative warfare. What also stood out was China's visible role, from drones to diplomatic messaging, marked it as a key player while the US scrambled to de-escalate. Unlike Kargil or Pulwama, this crisis revealed a more volatile strategic normal. South Asia's challenges extend beyond this flashpoint. The region grapples with Myanmar's humanitarian crisis, straining India's border regions, and Bangladesh's political instability under interim leadership, complicating trade and water sharing with ASEAN aspirations. Pakistan's military consolidation under Field Marshal Asim Munir fuels cross-border terrorism concerns, while Nepal navigates India's influence against China's economic inroads. Sri Lanka too faces strategic tug-of-wars with China's footprint challenging India's dominance. Add Trump tariffs disrupting SAARC and BIMSTEC trade frameworks, and South Asia's economic ambitions teeter on shaky grounds. This is a pivotal moment, and today's discussions will probe these fault lines. South Asia's crises are no longer just regional, they're global flashpoints. The question I leave for us to reflect is, can its actors, India, Pakistan, and their neighbors, forge a path to stability, or are we hurtling towards the next confrontation with more firepower and fewer off-ramps? Let's dive into this urgent, unfiltered conversation to uncover what's at stake and from where we go from here. We have with us a distinguished and diverse array of speakers for an informed and holistic discussions. We're joined by Apekshya Shah, Senior Fellow, Nepal Economic Forum, Ayesha Siddiqa, who I expect will be joining us soon. She's author and Senior Fellow, Department of War Studies in King's College, London. Lieutenant General Subrata Saha, former member of the National Security Advisory Board, Michael Kugelman, Senior Fellow, Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, Ambassador Prasad Kariyawasam, former Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, Shada Islam, founder of the New Horizons Project in Brussels, and last but not the least, Ambassador Tariq Ahmad Karim, Advisor Center for Bay of Bengal Studies at the Independent University in Bangladesh. Let me request, and we have about the first round. What I thought was we could divide this into two rounds so that there is more interactive discussion, and therefore may I request interveners to please take about 5 minutes each to make the headline points, and then we can move on to the next and then come back in the second round and perhaps even raise some questions from the parliament. Apekshya, can I begin with you?
All right, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Apekshya, and it is great to meet all of you virtually here today. It is such a privilege to be able to put my thoughts in front of such distinguished crowd, and I would like to express my gratitude to CUTS for giving me this space. Now, getting into the topic I was given today, exploring Nepal's diplomatic strategy in navigating India's influence and China's growing economic presence, focusing on connectivity projects and their implications for Nepal's role in regional economic integration. Given the breadth of the topic, I would try to keep my remarks under 5 minutes. China's increasing influence in South Asia has become an established geopolitical reality. Chinese influence in the region has undoubtedly expanded over the past 2 decades, but then again, China's influence has been growing globally, and South Asia was never going to be an exception. In this context, it is essential to recognize that most South Asian countries are considerably smaller, both economically and militarily, than both China and India. Therefore, the central issue is not merely the presence or extent of external influence, which is often unavoidable in asymmetrical relationships, but rather how this influence translates into tangible benefits that align with the national development goals, security priorities, and long term strategic interest of these smaller states. Moreover, the pace and nature of Chinese influence have varied significantly across South Asian countries. In some countries, China's presence has increased rapidly, positioning Beijing as a major partner in the economic growth trajectories and evolving security narratives. However, in the case of Nepal, the results have been more mixed. While Nepal has traditionally been committed to maintaining relations with China, this engagement has not solely been about balancing India's influence. Rather, it has also reflected Nepal's assertion of its sovereign right to engage with both its powerful neighbors, a critical consideration given Nepal's geographically landlocked position between China and India. Nepal's political leaderships across different eras and ideologies have consistently articulated the intention to maintain constructive relations with both neighbors. While this approach is often described as a balancing act, in practice it aligns more closely with what scholars refer to as a hedging strategy. The underlying idea is to avoid formal alignment with either of the two giants, even though Nepal remains structurally India leaning due to historical, cultural, and geographic proximity. This approach has been a defining characteristic of Nepal's foreign policy, rooted in the broader principle of non alignment. Nepal's China policy has long been shaped by geographic realities, notably the Himalayan terrain and China's historically cautious approach toward Nepal. While it's often suggested that Nepal actively pursued deeper ties with China after the 2015 border blockade, the reality is more complex. The recent deepening of Nepal China engagement reflects both Nepal's aspiration and China's evolving South Asia strategy focused on connectivity and regional cooperation. China's engagement in Nepal has increased, particularly in infrastructure, connectivity, political dialogue, and people to people exchanges. But progress has been gradual and varied across sectors. China's soft power in Nepal has definitely grown. Cultural exchanges, educational initiatives, and public interest in China's development model reflects this. Many in Nepal hope to use Chinese financing and connectivity initiatives like the BRI to advance development. Nepal's 2016 transit agreement with China and its PRI participation in 2017, notably the proposed Trans-Himalayan Connectivity Network, symbolize these ambitions. The initiatives aims to diversify Nepal's trade routes and reduce reliance on a single transit partner. The progress of the initiative has been slow, with key projects like the Kerung-Kathmandu Railway still at the feasibility stage, facing technical and sustainability uncertainties. However, it was not until late 2024, that was last year, that Nepal and China finalized the framework agreement for Belt and Road cooperation. Essentially, it is supposed to be an implementing agreement, widely seen as the most concrete step towards realizing the BRI in Nepal. Still, the fact that it took nearly 7 years to finalize this agreement reflects the complexities and ambiguities surrounding Nepal's BRI engagement. While the latest framework has been hailed as a diplomatic achievement, identifying 10 specific projects to be pursued under a BRI, financing will be negotiated on project by project basis. Nonetheless, skepticism still persists. Critics argue that some of the selected projects may have limited impact on Nepal's long-term economic development, while alternative initiatives with potentially greater transformative value were overlooked. Concerns have also been raised that the primary beneficiaries of some projects could be sections of Nepal's political elites rather than economy or general public at large. A key factor shaping Nepal's membership to BRI and its engagement with China is also India's strategic response. India has resisted Chinese backed projects in Nepal, blocking airspace access for Chinese built airports and refusing to purchase power from Chinese invested hydropower projects. These constraints limit the regional impact of Chinese initiatives. Similarly, the 2016 Nepal-China Transit Agreement, aimed at connecting China to South Asia via Nepal, has stalled due to poor domestic infrastructure in Nepal. In any case, without Indian cooperation, Nepal's vision for trilateral connectivity remains largely aspirational. The BRI for now effectively ends in Nepal. If Nepal plays its cards wisely, it can still benefit from engagement with China, prioritizing infrastructure projects that drive economic growth, especially in northern regions like Kathmandu, which lies close to Kerung and Lhasa. Development in these Chinese regions offer untapped potential for Nepal, provided the right projects are chosen and effectively implemented. Even Nepal's domestic infrastructure, where significant gap remains, could benefit from Chinese expertise and financing, potentially helping to accelerate the country's economic growth. However, poor governance, delays in project execution, inflated cost, and compromised economic viability have long been persistent challenges in Nepal's development landscape, regardless of whether projects are funded by China or external partners. These structural weaknesses must be addressed if Nepal is to fully capitalize on its engagement with China. While Nepal's participation in BRI and engagement with China reflects both opportunity and ambition, it also highlights the structural constraints small states face in managing ties with major powers. So far, China Nepal engagement has done little to advance broader South Asian regional initiatives. However, if Nepal can leverage Chinese investment to drive domestic development and economic growth, the benefits are likely to spill over, strengthening Nepal's position and contributing positively to the region. Ultimately, Nepal's ability to set clear development priorities, secure fair terms, and build political consensus will determine whether engagement with China translate into both national gains and wider regional impact.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Apekshya. May I request General Subrata Saha? I don't see Aisha Siddiqa. I don't know whether she's joined. Aisha, are you there? No. Subrata, over to you. 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pradeep, and thank you all the esteemed panelists. It's a great opportunity to be with all of you, and with some, of course, I've had the chance to participate earlier. I've been asked specifically to talk about the cross-border terrorism from Pakistan in particular. I wish Aisha were here, but nonetheless. You see, this cross-border terrorism from Pakistan is nothing new. It has been there right since the partition of India and Pakistan, if you will. Only thing is, in the terminologies have changed over the years. It started with Op Gulmarg in 1947, when hundreds of Lashkars, armed by the Pakistan military, supported by the Pakistan military, and including to the extent of some disembodied soldiers of the Second World War and some NCOs, non-commissioned officers, on leave were sent out as part of Lashkars that came into soon after the partition and the independence, if you will. So that we all know is the beginning of the creation of the ceasefire line, and later on rechristened as line of control post 1971. In 65, it was Op Gibraltar, which was a repeat of the same story of 47, a slightly more refined, a little more ambitious, where it was hoped that the intelligence services of Pakistan would have created such a state of instability and such a state of disturbance within Jammu and Kashmir that it would, a conventional operation from across the ceasefire line would be a kind of a cakewalk to take, charge of those areas. This was, as much military, as much as the brainchild of Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who prevailed on the then president to say that India is recouping itself post the 1962 India-China war. And so it is before they get, their strength in place, it is time to do something. So Op Gibraltar was launched, as I said, in a slightly improved format of Gulmarg. Now that, as you know, did not succeed. So when it did not succeed, they decided to open the front along the international border, starting from the Jammu region. And once they opened along the Jammu region, so India decided to open it along the rest of the international border. So this, as I said, This is nothing new. But now something interesting, I do not know, is not written too much about, is in mid 70s, that is after the 1971 India-Pakistan war, liberation of Bangladesh. Obviously, Pakistan wanted to, get back at India in one way or the other. So they start with a kind of incipient Islamist insurgency in Afghanistan, primarily to overthrow Daud Muhammad Khan, who was friendly with both India as well as Soviet Union. So actually, it is this insurgency which sort of attracts the attention of the United States, attracts the attention of Saudi Arabia, and they think this is the insurgency that can be leveraged to beat back the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan that took place in 1979. And therefore, all the support or all the wherewithal starts pouring in to defeat that jihad. And the success in beating back the Soviet invasion emboldens Pakistan, and Ziaul Haq chooses to utilize all the leftover munitions to intensify and begin an intensified campaign, not only in Jammu and Kashmir, also in Punjab, and so on and so forth. After that, it has been a consistent, and as Zia directs even that time, that it should be kept below a certain threshold so that India does not respond conventionally. And the larger scheme and all, we do not have that kind of time here to explain. So the point which I am making is this cross-border terrorism and its support has been a consistent effort, and we have seen it manifest in very, very, shall we say, heinous ways, and most recent being Pahalgam that Pradeep spoke about a little while back. And of course, something as bad as what happened in 26/11 in Mumbai. And each time, India's response has been different. And if you see, India's response has been gradually becoming more and more, shall we say, going up the ladder of toughness, or a stronger response, if you will. After what happened in Uri, it was the first front line of launch pads. After what happened in Pulwama, it went deeper into the training camps. And this time around, India chose to go back and hit primarily at the terror training camps. And once Pakistan responded against military targets in India, India responded by hitting back, suppressing their air defense, and then the extent of damage and the request for ceasefire and so forth, so on, all that has taken place. The irony of the whole thing is, if you see the leadership pattern in Pakistan, there is a very, clear linkage which is there. And that clear linkage, if you see, one is every time there is an ambitious military leader in Pakistan, whether it is a Musharraf, whether it is a Munir or a Zia, you will see this entire thing getting a push, and invariably these leaders are aspiring to take on the leadership of the nation. So somewhere there is a linkage to what is happening in the internal politics of Pakistan. The other, if you see, I'll just wrap up. The other point which you see, every time there is an attempt by the civilian leadership to try and, cool down things between India and Pakistan, the Pakistan military is not prepared to accept it, and they must do some mischief to make sure that the situation comes back under their control, and they make it necessary for Pakistan to hand over charge again to the Pakistan military directly or indirectly, and continue with this policy of cross-border terrorism from their side. Since I have been given the flag, so I'll stop here and wait for my next turn. Thank you, Pradeep, and thank you to everybody else. You are muted, Pradeep.
Now I request Michael. Michael, over to you for 5 to 7 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, sir. And I wanted to thank Cuts for including me in this very timely discussion. And I also applaud Cuts for convening a very rich array of experts and analysts from around the region to discuss the region. And I think that's very much to be commended. So I've been asked to speak a bit about external players in the region, particularly the US and China, as well as the new Trump administration and what we can expect from it and how this might impact the region's dynamics. But let me just make three broad points for context here. One is that South Asia is no longer as much of a fashionable term in Washington as it used to be. I'd argue that it's increasingly being displaced by the term Indo-Pacific. And of course, as understood in Washington, the Indo-Pacific comprises much of South Asia, minus Afghanistan and Pakistan. That doesn't mean that the US does not have approaches to those two countries, but they're not considered, at least formally, to be a part of the Indo-Pacific. Afghanistan, because of course the US doesn't recognize the Taliban regime there, and Pakistan, there's ambiguity, which is very interesting. But as I understand it, Pakistan is not necessarily understood to be a part of the Indo-Pacific per the US perspective. Second point for context is that I expect the Indo-Pacific slash South Asia, by extension, to get more strategic attention from this new administration later this year. I think that during these initial months of this new Trump administration, the initial foreign policy focus will be and has been on trying to end wars, as well as focusing on foreign policy issues closer to home. So I think that it'll be a bit later this year when we start to get a better sense from this administration as to what it plans to do policy-wise, strategy-wise, in South Asia. And I think that one key signpost to watch out for is when we have the new Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asia in place. I mean, Paul Kapoor did have his confirmation hearings a few weeks ago. He'll be confirmed soon enough, maybe even this week. But I think that once that post is filled and occupied, I think then you'll start to see more movement from the Trump administration when it comes to developing a policy and approach to the region. Third point I'll make for context is that the US has not really had a formal South Asia strategy since the first Trump administration. When you'll recall, he announced a new South Asia policy at the Fort Myer military base. But I would argue that even that strategy was not truly a South Asia policy. It was really an Afghanistan slash Pakistan and an India strategy. And I think that sort of represents how US administrations have looked at the broader region in recent decades. They've tended to look at it through different silos. I mean, for many years, when the US was fighting its war in Afghanistan, the US approach to the region was looked at through that war, as well as through Pakistan and how Pakistan could be helpful, or in many cases not helpful, when it came to the US pursuing its interests and goals in Afghanistan. And then, of course, separately, there's been an approach towards strengthening partnership with India. But I would argue that in the last few decades, the rest of the region, unfortunately, has been given short shrift strategically. But I do think that's starting to change, and that gets me to my next point. Trump 2.0, in my view, will look at South Asia through two core lenses, two main lenses. One will be trade, and we know that the reciprocal tariff policy, is something that everyone is talking about in the context of the world on the whole, not just South Asia. But as this group and this audience will know, 4 of the 8 SAARC states were hit with hefty reciprocal tariffs, which of course could snap back once the pause ends next week. And this is no small matter, the fact that 4 of the 8 SARC states were hit with them, because the US is a top export destination for all 4 of them. And in the case of several, the #1 export destination, particularly for textiles, RMGs, and so on. The other lens through which I expect this administration will look at the region is great power competition. And this will be a follow-on from what we saw with the Biden administration, as well as the latter part of the first Trump administration. I think there'll be a focus on trying to create incentives for countries in the region to rely less on China for economic support. This could, I think, open up some opportunities for institutions like the DFC, the International Development Finance Corporation, which essentially sponsors infrastructure and investment projects. It still needs to be reauthorized by Congress, which I think will happen. But if so, there might be some opportunities for that to be pushed out, as it was during the Biden administration, and it had been quite active in India, and 1 or 2 other parts of the region as well. Now, if they want to get a case study as to where things might be going with this administration and the region, again, there's no formal policy or strategy yet. But I think one thing to look at for now is the phone call that just happened yesterday between the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Mohammed Yunus, the head of the Bangladesh interim government. According to readouts from both sides, they discussed mainly 2 issues, or at least this is what we were told by the readouts: economic cooperation and efforts to collaborate together to enhance security in the Indo-Pacific. And when it comes to the latter, from a U.S. perspective, whenever you're talking about strengthening stability and security in the Indo-Pacific, you're talking about working together to counter China. One quick comment on great power influence in South Asia. The conventional wisdom is that the U.S. is losing the competition with China and South Asia. And in the current Trump era, it could fall even further behind. The reasoning for that is that in the last decade or so, as I think we heard earlier, China has deepened its footprint in South Asia through its loans and investments, mainly through BRI, and that's earned it a fair amount of influence. The U.S. has not been able to develop as much of a footprint. And now with the U.S., with the Trump administration having suspended foreign aid and dismantled USAID, the region, and particularly countries that previously received large amounts of development assistance from the US, may turn even more to China for help. And I think that's true, but look at what the US is doing, what this administration is doing through its tariff policies. Countries around the region, or a number of them, have appealed to the administration for talks to work out deals to reduce tariff stress. And if you look at India, for example, India's government, during the very earliest weeks of the current Trump administration, it was making concessions. It was pledging to reduce tariffs and buy more American goods. So I would argue that Trump, too, is using or trying to use trade and tariffs as a pressure tactic and as a tool of influence over the region. The region has workarounds, particularly the larger economies with more agency, like India. They can look to explore deeper trade partnerships and deals with other key markets like the EU to hedge against possible hits to their trade ties with the US. But I still think that that's an interesting way to look at
Michael, would you like
this
to wind
administration's
up?
influence. Yep, I'll end right there. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Sorry to cut you in. There's a thought. Let me be egalitarian and see to it that all speakers get about 5 to 7 minutes. Can I now request Ambassador Prasad Kariyawasam, the former Foreign Secretary of Sri Lanka, for your 5 to 7 minutes, sir?
Thank you, Professor Mehta. Happy to see you and happy to join Kutch for the first time. I look forward for this engagement. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. The direction that I have given is to basically talk more about Sri Lanka and how we approach the regional cooperation. So let me say something. Maybe already you know about the country, but I have to repeat something so that I give context to what I'm going to say. Sri Lanka, of course, has a lot of things in common with the rest of South Asia, but we have certain uniqueness in our sense for several reasons. One is geographical location in the middle of the Orient and along the east-west main shipping lane. Then civilizational link with India, starting with Emperor Asoka's time, 2nd century BC, which changed Sri Lanka's social order, which still thrives in the same pattern, which is based on Buddhism. And then, of course, Sri Lanka has the top Human Development Index. We are the top ranked country in South Asia. And our population has dipped. It is only 22 million. Growth rate is negative. So we are aging population with the population doesn't grow at all. Then, of course, we are the oldest democracy since 1931. We have had uninterrupted democracy, and democracy is totally entrenched in the country. Then, of course, we have had insurgencies, two of them. One northern and southern insurgencies since independence, and we were the first country to liberalize the economy in 1978, long before rest of South Asia. So this is the background through which our policies and approach to rest of the world is shaped. But there is multi-party consensus for promoting Sri Lanka as a hub nation of the Indian Ocean and Indo-Pacific. Once again, we were a hub nation long years ago, before in last century, or even before, even since time immemorial. But we lost that to today to Singapore, Dubai. Others have taken over. So there is this. There's a promotion of that aspect. So advancing infrastructure development for this purpose is the key for many people, given that 90% of the world trade today is seaborne. 90% of the world trade is seaborne. So promoting country as a rest and recreational center, service-oriented nation is objective bipartisan. Then making an economy export quality over quantity approach, given that we are a small nation, small economy, and people is another aspect. Other one is human resources. We export human resources, but we have to import human resources as well because our population is shrinking. We are aging. For this purpose, we have had infrastructure developed over the years. The key is 3 deep water ports. One is the Colombo port. Colombo port is a deep water unique port which is thriving, and 70% of its cargo is transshipment to India, and it has deep water terminals. There's one terminal controlled by China, another terminal going to be controlled by India, and so there is that. Asian giants are investing in Sri Lanka and taking part in our development. Hambantota port is another deep water port. China is controlling that, but Indian car industry is using that as a ro-ro destination big time. Trincomalee, Sri Lanka is promoting it as an industrial and energy hub, where India is taking the lead. It is the India-dominated the idea. Then, of course, we have 2 airports. Mantala is underutilized, totally underutilized. Colombo Port City with a marina is still totally underutilized, developed by China. Then Colombo Dockyard, which is a very important shipbuilding company, is now being taken over by Indian company from Japan. So Japan is leaving and India is coming in. These initiatives are underpinned by several factors. One is need to ensure peace and stability in the Indian Ocean is a must for Sri Lanka's survival and for being a hub nation. Then, of course, creating a web of partnerships with key nations in the region and beyond. India remains the predominant partner and that has multi-party consensus in the country for that purpose. It's the biggest investor, biggest trading partner, biggest tourist generating country, and manpower supply also it's big. Then, of course, US, EU, China, very important, and Japan, all South Asian nations and Middle East countries, including Israel and Iran, are partners of Sri Lanka in many fields. EU is big, China is big, US is big, and Japan. Of course, Sri Lanka tried to approach these relationships avoiding zero-sum. Zero-sum relationships are what we are trying hard to avoid. Instead, we are trying to promote positive sum or win-win relationships, which is a tough one, but that is the approach. Of course, there is a multi-party consensus promoting regional cooperation for this purpose, because there is an understanding in the country that regional cooperation should be our default position in a situation where things are very volatile. And now I come to the regional mechanisms we have: SAARC, BIMSTEC, IORAC. SAARC is dormant and totally dormant, but it will, in my view, can be resurrected, revived anytime whenever there is India-Pakistan rapprochement. When or it will ever happen, I don't know. But I am very hopeful that it can be done. It rapprochement, despite many doomsday sayers, I think it can be done. BIMSTEC. BIMSTEC is a promising organization. Because it's centered around Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal region is totally underutilized by the region and by regional countries, given that it is if India takes the lead in BIMSTEC can thrive. Any regional group to lead have momentum, India must take the lead. Otherwise, no regional organization in our region will survive. IORAC is another important Indo-Pacific organization, and Sri Lanka at the moment chairs it, but still it is not taken off because we have not been able to come up with anything that is practical enough for countries to embrace. So there's a lot of work to be done. In conclusion, let me say, given the upheaval in global trading networks and global strategic turmoil, it's time for South Asian nations to focus on the region and pan-Asian trade and travel for leisure. And we have ready-made platforms and very good ideas. What we require is political will to do expand pan-Asian connections. Thank you.
Thank you, Prasad. And with that, let me turn to Shada Islam. Shada, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Pradeep, and thank you for inviting me to take part in this very, very interesting conversation. So I'm going to focus on the European Union and its relationship, or lack of any real relationship, as I put it, with South Asia. I think the EU's engagement with South Asia is really underwhelming, apart from with India, and even that is ritualistic and driven by purely trade interests rather than any kind of geopolitical understanding. But let me just take a step back and talk about this very challenging geopolitical moment for the European Union and its 27 member states. For us here in Europe, and all of you have probably noted it and pointed it out, our policies, our geopolitical relationships are often colored by our contacts with the United States. In fact, of course, we consult regularly with the US, and as you may have seen at the recent NATO summit held in The Hague, there is a certain subservience that is in that relationship when the Secretary General of NATO calls Donald Trump daddy. It sort of reflects the relationship that we have with the United States. And I'm not just joking about it. I think our struggle really remains to put that concept of strategic autonomy, turn that from concept to reality. And there are serious efforts being made to do that. But they are being cut back and eroded systematically by our security dependence on the United States, a security dependence that now is very visible when it comes to Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And this is, of course, now our predominant challenge. And there we are being once again sidelined, as you've all noticed, by what's happening between Putin and Donald Trump. On top of that, our trade relationship, which is also the sort of the backbone of our relationship and our transatlantic alliance, is also under threat because of the tariffs that Donald Trump is envisaging. And obviously, you all know that the European Union has been described as Donald Trump as an adversary, an enemy, and worse. So we're in a bit of a conundrum. You're not the only region in the world that faces existential dilemmas about our relationship. So that's the backdrop. On top of that, ladies and gentlemen, of course, we have the Gaza conflict, which is frankly a great historical responsibility of the European Union and its member states, at least some of them. And there were, once again, we've seen the impotence, the glaring impotence of the European Union in any effort. In fact, according to very senior officials, UN officials, including Francesca Albanese, she has said that we, as European leaders, at least some of us, our leaders, are complicit and enablers of the genocide because our weapons sales and our support for Israel in its devastation and genocidal actions in Gaza continue. So we are in an awful, awful geopolitical mess. Our credibility is an all-time low. And on top of all that, we are very, very divided. So the only hope we have as a European Union today is that some of our member states will break away from this collective paralysis that we have on issues like Gaza, which is a fundamental issue, or Iran, where international law is being broken and we haven't been able to say anything about it. I think some of our member states, led by France, Ireland, Slovenia, will be hopefully working together outside the EU framework, in a framework that is called enhanced cooperation to deal with these huge geopolitical challenges. Now, that's the backdrop to what we see as regards the EU and the Indo-Pacific and South Asia. So as you can imagine, gentlemen and ladies and friends, the Indo-Pacific and specifically the South Asian subcontinent, if you like, South Asia, is way low in our list of priorities. In fact, the only country that even emerges out of it is, as I said, India, because we're hoping to strike a trade deal with India. Some say by the end of this year, some say it will take longer, but in any case, it's a very India's short-sighted, I would say, India-centric South Asian policy, whereby the assets, the energy, the resources of the other countries of South Asia are neglected or dealt with in a very, once again, formalistic, ritualistic manner, where it's all about GSP plus when it comes to Sri Lanka and Pakistan, and some talk of poverty alleviation, but it remains a very old-fashioned relationship with hardly any elements of strategic thinking, where I think we're doing ourselves a great harm in Europe by not doing that. Now, even if it comes to China, as you may have noticed, we see China as a competitor, we see China as a partner and a rival. And the relationship, of course, has been extremely volatile, up and down, depending on the geopolitical environment. At the moment, China, there is a possibility, and I would put it in inverted commas, of perhaps a kind of rapprochement between China and the EU because of Donald Trump and his tariffs and Donald Trump and his actions. But once again, I would advise caution on thinking that China and the EU would ever come together. There are huge ideological differences and huge European concerns about over subsidization, export capacity, technology, cyber attacks, all kinds of enormous number of tech issues are there, rare earth exports. So there is going to be an EU-China summit at the end of July. I've written a piece in South China Morning Post saying if it's going to be just another theatrical sort of display of differences among us, between us, it's better to cancel it if you're not going to be able to come up with anything productive or anything that makes sense in today's very volatile and turbulent world. Why do it? The only answer we have to China's, let's say, great competitiveness in Africa specifically, we're less focused on what's happening in South Asia, is of course the Global Gateway brand that the EU has come up with as a kind of response to the Belt and Road Initiative. But all of my friends in Africa, and I have several very close contacts there, are very skeptical of the Global Gateway and what brand that it is, and the kind of sort of neo-colonial narrative that is deeply embedded in some of our European policies. So overall, I would say that this is a moment of reckoning for the EU. Yes, I am winding down. It is a moment of reckoning for the EU. And one thing to remember as we go forward is that among us, the 27 member states, there is indeed great competition as well when it comes to exporting arms to South Asia, when it comes to exporting goods and services to South Asia. So we are also competing not just with the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans. We're also competing with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Shada. Thank you very much. That was excellent. May I, to the last speaker, Ambassador Tariq Karim. Tariq, over to you. 5 to 7 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Pradeep, first for having invited me to this very, very timely event. I think in view of what is happening all over South Asia, it's good that we have an airing of views and try to understand and figure out what's happening. I will begin with taking a cue from your own concept note, where you asked, why is it that the region is in perpetual conundrum? To which I would add the question, why has this region not been able to move forward in any form of regional cooperation when other regional enemies elsewhere in Europe, in Southeast Asia, or in several regions of Africa have moved forward phenomenally? I
And
mean, this
Latin
for me,
America. Karim,
and
and
Latin
Latin
America,
America.
and in Latin America, everywhere else in the world, we are the sole exceptions. What is it that sets us apart? And you have given an answer yourself in that note, a cryptic answer, that the answer lies in history. South Asia remains and will remain a major threat of a theater of great power game. My perception will be a little different compared to the perception of my colleagues from Nepal and Sri Lanka and Bhutan or Maldives if they had joined, for the simple reason that Bangladesh was, as was Pakistan, and fortunately I don't see anybody from Pakistan here, were part of the greater civilizational, historical geospace that was India, that was known as India for millennia. And it was basically a form of great power rivalry within this space that ultimately led to the partition in 1947. That's a complex history. I will not go into that. Now, George Santayana, the Spanish-American philosopher, in 1905, in one of his essays, had said, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Unfortunately, that is prophetically true for what emerged as the South Asian or the Indian subcontinent became renamed as the South Asian subcontinent, but basically for India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. William Faulkner, in a novel in 1948, said, the past is never dead. It is not even past. That is what we are saddled with. Now, Bangladesh and India, the topic you have assigned me is strengthening Bangladesh-India relations and opportunities for bilateral and regional cooperation, and leveraging Bangladesh's strategic partnership with India to enhance bilateral trade, connectivity, etc., and how Bangladesh's interim leadership can navigate domestic challenges. Now, the first part I can give where we had come to, because in the last 2 decades, the progress in Bangladesh-India ties was phenomenal compared to what did not happen in the previous 2.5 decades. And I can give you a litany of that, what happened in matters of trade, of people-to-people contacts, of how much both countries were making from each other. I can tell you how the infrastructure for connectivity had been enhanced and resumed, because most of the connectivity, whether by rail or by river, had been cut off after the 1965 war between India and Pakistan, when Bangladesh, then East Pakistan, was a part of Pakistan. We have to remember that Bengal has been one of the richest provinces, whether it was the Bengal Suba of the Mughals, or the Bengal area, pre-Bengal area, or it was part of the Bengal presidency in the British era. And then after the partition, we lost it all. In my view, we lost it because we severed our connectivity and our connections. We severed the very factor which enabled the British as a colonial power to extract the maximum and reap the maximum from that extraction in India. Why are we not able to get out of this? And why? I mean, can the interim government address things? The interim government is an interim government. It's here for another maybe 6 months or maybe a little longer until the elections are held. And already the political field is agitating with people calling for immediate elections, elections yesterday, or elections in the future after performing all the, doing all the reforms. That will continue. So interim government has to barely just manage things and try and put the institutions, make them ready to be able to conduct the elections and hand over to a government in an orderly transfer of power. In the meantime, whatever has been achieved, I think they are in pause mode. I think that's the best way I can describe it. I hope that they will not regress to where they have come, because that would be disastrous. Is the law of physics. Like an elastic band, you stretch it too much, it doesn't go back to its previous shape. That's where we are in. Geography matters. We cannot escape each other. We cannot even shut our eyes to each other. We have to learn how we have to be able to live with each other. The problem is that history keeps intervening. And if I were to relate only 2 points of history, then you would understand better why we are or why we have not been. At least that's the way I tried to figure out why we could not arrive at regional cooperation. The history forming India-Bangladesh relationship starts in 71. But I would say it starts even earlier. There were two other points, although some Indian commentators have mentioned one. The earlier point was 47, because Bangladesh emerged as East Pakistan in 47, and Pakistan emerged because, and I emphasize the point, because the Muslim leadership of Bengal signed on to the Pakistan agenda. Without the Muslim leadership signing on to the Pakistan agenda, Pakistan could not have been formed, because it would not have had the Muslim constituted majority needed to form a nation on the basis of religion. And in 47, East Pakistan had more Muslims in its one province that it was than the combined Muslim population of the 4 provinces that constituted West Pakistan. So that was the reality. Now, the second was, of course, 71. Now, in 47, we signed on to the Muslim homeland agenda, but the Bengali Muslims of East Pakistan have a hyphenated identity, and you cannot escape that. If we constituted the majority of Muslims of Pakistan, we in what is Bangladesh were Bengalis and Muslims. Our cultural history goes back to the 8th century. Our Islamic history goes back to the 12th century. And basically in 1971, we said, no, Islam cannot be the binding glue of a state. We prioritize or privilege our Bengaliness. And then since then, basically within Bangladesh, we have been a schizophrenic polity. And it is this ding-dong battle which has been going on ever since. And right now, we are from the ding of 2009 to the dong of 2025.
Tariq, would you like to wind up?
Yeah, so we have to figure out a way of where we come at a consensus. Interim government, let's see how it tackles it. It is trying to make amends, but we'll have to wait and see. I'll wind up here. And then
Tariq, can I ask you a question? You recounted the history of Bangladesh. I recall the history from 1908, when Lord Curzon divided Bengal into 2.
1905.
1905. And then 1908, it was re-merged. So, that was when the seed was laid for Pakistan, in a sense.
Yes.
In my view. They were divided on, again, communal lines. Having said that, the floor is open for questions, and you may like to raise your hand or put your question in the chat box, whichever way you like. We have a very distinguished audience, I see, and welcome questions and comments from some of our audience. Bipul, over to you.
Thank you for a rich discussion. I would like to differ from what Ambassador Karim has just said towards the end of his presentation. See, unfortunately, Ambassador Karim, your voice is very, very minority in today's Bangladesh. And that's a reality. I am a regular reader of your newspapers, TV talk shows, then various other social media platforms. The Bengaliness is gone. I was in Dhaka when the last Turkish election was taking place. And people were not sleeping at night. They're more interested in whether Erdogan is going to win or not. The manner in which your even top newspapers like Daily Star or Pratham Alo, they reported this Israel-Iran conflict. I think Bengaliness is gone. There is more and more Islamization of the Bangladeshi society. And that's a reality. I have no problem with that. Yeah. As long as it doesn't have another form of 1,000 or whatever less number of cuts on India, it's fine. So my point is that the larger issue is that the India is growing. We are going to grow. Whatever maybe the headwinds, tailwinds, taking everything into account. If our neighbors, they want to grow with us, they are welcome. If they don't want to grow with us, we won't be unhappy. That's the larger point, and that is something as a thought leader of Bangladesh or Pakistan or Sri Lanka, Nepal, you people have to take lead in putting that in so many words in clear terms to your civil society. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the point which Bipul made applies to Southeast Asia in particular, Karim. Having said that, may I invite Mikiko Tanaka? Please identify yourself.
Hello, good evening. I'm Mikiko. I work with ESCAP based in New Delhi. So my question is, thank you very much for all of your, interventions. What kind of track 2 is going on now, or what kind of track 2 dialogue is possible? What space is there?
Track 2 between whom?
Track 2 dialogue between any of the countries.
Well, Mikiko, this is an example of track 2 dialogue which you see.
Okay.
And there have been some other dialogues in this, and Michael has been a part of some of these. He has also participated in some of these track 2 dialogues. Track 2 dialogues are taking place all the time. Some are publicized and some are not.
And what's what kind of effect are they having? I mean, addressing the kind of issues that.
Well, in Bangladesh, it is still, as I mentioned, this is an interim government. So, okay, Michael Kugelman mentioned that yesterday there was the conversation between Secretary of State Rubio and the chief advisor, and the statement says what it says. But the chief advisor has also visited China, and there was a big communique at the end of it, and statements as to how China was going to be coming in and making participating in economic zones and infrastructure projects. And yesterday there was a report saying the BNP delegation came back from China and said that they have invited China to come and participate in the Tista project. Before that, there was a visit by the chief advisor to Japan, which is very much a member of the Quad, where again, very good statements came out and good commitments. So this is happening. This is, I think, the chief The interim government at the moment, yes, it has also opened up relations with Pakistan. Visa restrictions have been reduced. Flights are being resumed. So you get a mixed signal. It's a mixed signal. It is a holding position. Bangladesh has always, whichever side of the schizophrenia we are on, we have always said that we need to have good relations with everyone, irrespective of whether they are our friends or very far away. And it has, I think, the situated where we are, if we look at ourselves on the map, there is no other option. Okay, that is the way it will go. Where the track 2 dialogues will lead, I have no. We'll all be having different conclusions in these different dialogues.
No, Mikiko, let me venture, having been in this area of work since last 40 years.
Okay, let me explain something which I deliberately refrained from saying in my earlier part of the statement.
Can I complete that?
Yeah.
No, it helps in building a narrative, and the narrative may not, help to shape things 5 years. It may shape things 10 years later. Tariq, over to you.
Okay. The narrative in which we are a prisoner, unfortunately, is a narrative that our history as divided Westphalian states, with all the connotations of the post-1945 world order of the Westphalian states comprising the unit of reckoning, are only about 80 years old. Our history of having been together, umbilically joined in various ways, fighting each other and loving each other, goes back to a couple of millennia at least. The problem is the history of the last 80 years overshadow everything else. But the umbilical, the genetic ties, the codes that still attach us, makes anything internal in one country also a part of the other. Like Indians react to anything happening in Bangladesh, Bangladeshis also react to anything happening in India. Or Pakistan is reacting. It's all the same. Because at one time, we were acting and reacting with each other for a very long period, much longer than what we have been separated. And in a sense, unfortunately, we adopted secularism as part of our constitutional pillar. And I've been writing, I'm not saying this for the first time here, I've been writing this publicly in my columns in newspapers in India as well as Bangladesh, and also pointing out how I thought the relations were backsliding, because as was kindly mentioned by your colleague Bipul, I played quite a big role in trying to set relations right, basically in order to try and forge regional cooperation. That agenda itself, it seems, I saw it backsliding from 2017 onwards, and then I came back to Bangladesh then.
Thank you. Thank you, Tariq. Tariq, can we move on to a question?
I want to make this point, because otherwise I will be misunderstood by many in Bangladesh, which could have consequences.
Okay.
The backsliding is happening because when Bangladeshis here see India forsaking the principle of secularism, that India is moving away and becoming a robust majoritarianism, and Indians expect us to remain secular. I'm sorry, Bangladesh will not remain an island of secularism in an ocean which is of turbulent majoritarianism. That is the reality. That is what Bipul was pointing to. Whatever happens in India has a resonating factor within Bangladesh, and that spreads. So if now Indians see that Bangladesh is going to the right, part of it is that reaction. I would, however, say, hold on, hold your breath. When the heat of when the dust is down and the heat of the moment has cooled down, people will start waking up.
Thank you, Tariq.
Any other than what has happened.
Thank you very much. I think we should move on. There is a question from Dr. Plomberger of the from Bangkok, Dr. Plomberger. How relevant do you think is BIMSTEC for regional cooperation in South Asia, or on a more limited scale for the Bay of Bengal? Could it replace SARC?
Can I respond to that?
Yes, please, Prashant.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Well, the mechanisms we have, both BIMSTEC and SARC. SARC is older. It served a big purpose at a particular time. At least, as I recall in my career, during early days of SARC, it was a good platform for leaders to meet. India, Pakistan especially. The SARC summit comes, the most important meeting is India-Pakistan meeting. That perhaps gives them a platform to discuss things without having getting involved in other recognition, all that stuff. So that platform was a very valuable platform to get regional matters solved and keep it under particular box. Now, of course, we have lost it now. Now, how to revive SARC? I think it's another story. We don't have to. I mean, it's a long story. We can't. But SARC, at least, we'll keep it dormant for better days. So SARC at the moment is we have to keep it in the back burner. BIMSTEC, on the other hand, is a it's a easily workable platform, and that platform does not include Pakistan. So therefore, things are easy. All the countries in the BIMSTEC are having good relationships with each other. Of course, at this point, as we have observed now with discussion, India-Bangladesh relationship has to be getting back to its normalcy at some point. But I don't think it affects BIMSTEC. So BIMSTEC is a platform where I think India must focus, because unless India gives leadership to any regional organization, that is not going to work. And here I have this comment. I feel some in India, not people like you, Professor Mehta, do not see the value of this regional mechanism for India itself, because India is it's like US does not see the value of UN for it. US thinks UN is there to use only, not to anything else. So there is a value in this organization for India. I hope India will realize that. At the moment, it is being used as a platform to grandstand. That is not enough. Platform to grandstand is one thing. A platform to make things happen regionally so that there is win-win for everyone in the region is a must, and there is a lot to be done. And I hope we can do that, because that will be a good start, and that might be a catalyst for SARC to come back normal. But that's a different issue. So that's where. So BIMSTEC, I can talk for a long time about where we can. Ocean is the key there. Thank you.
Ambassador, our Prime Minister has made a very clear statement on BIMSTEC. And he believes that it should be, supported. I have two more hands raised. Jayesh Mathur. Jayesh, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, sir. And at the very outset, I would like to thank Guts for organizing this very timely and insightful webinar. As South Asia has always been associated with Perpetual Conundrum. I heard a lot of panelists speak about the various commonalities, the fact that India, Pakistan, Bangladesh were part of a larger, bigger, grand civilization. But one thing which a lot of commentators miss is the fact that there are deep-seated structural differences which are at the heart of what the South Asian region is going through at the moment. And in the backdrop of these differences which exist, do you think that there is greater room for external players like the US and China to come in and influence the course of events in a manner that they like? And if that is the case, what are the options available to India to counter this?
Thank you. Commodore Jayasingh? We'll take the questions at the end of this, because we are coming to an end. We have another 10 minutes, of course. Commodore Jayasingh. Commodore Jay Singh, over to you.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm very sorry. Uh, my question is to Ambassador Kariyawasam. Sir, you mentioned something about, and again, the answer you just gave about SARC, that SARC is a dormant organization. Uh, well, that, of course, is dormant and practically dead, if you ask me, at the moment, unless, as you said, India, Pakistan can come to some sort of rapprochement and revive the organization. But the mutual, I think, trust deficit is going to be a major stumbling block. But what I wanted to ask you was, just this morning in the newspaper, I read that China and Pakistan are discussing setting up a regional organization to replace SARC. Now, that and Bangladesh could become party to that, but Bangladesh so far has not shown any inclination to do so. Now, if something like that were to come up, that would definitely not be beneficial to the South Asian region. That will be driven by other forces. So, do you think it's a possibility that China could drive a South Asian regional organization to replace SARC along with Pakistan? And what would India's reaction be to that?
First of all, Commander, I have not heard this story because perhaps someone is sending a trial balloon, and as you could see, there will not be an appetite for such organization to join such an organization, especially I would say from Sri Lanka's point of view. Not that we have anything against Pakistan or China. We recognize Pakistan is part of South Asia. China is doing a lot of business with South Asia, and biggest business partner for China is India, not other countries. So there is like US, China are very major partners of all South Asian nations, but a South Asian organization that will be led by Pakistan and China is something I don't think that's going to be attractive to anyone at this point, because there's no reason for that. That's how I would think, because there is no logic to it. What it can do, whereas if BIMSTEC has a logic, SARC dormant, but it has a logic. So that's where my response is.
So the newspaper article actually said that Pakistan and China will set it up and include all the other South Asian nations and invite India to join. That was the wording of
Commodore Jay Singh, I
Yes, sir.
agree with Ambassador Kariyawasam that
Yes.
it's a trial balloon. It doesn't make any sense.
I agree.
On the contrary, we have a very active sub-regional organization in South Asia, which is BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal.
Yes,
And
yes.
that has been doing a lot of work together and moving forward with its usual hiccups. Having said that, let me now come to the concluding round of this, and let me begin with Michael. Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just quickly make a comment or two about some of the questions that were brought up. Someone asked about track twos, and I think that those are so important, particularly in this region. And my understanding is that after the most recent India-Pakistan conflict, there has been at least one new track two put together. But the thing about track twos is that they can only work if they focus on truly innovative ideas that are focused on the future. And if people get bogged down in the past, track twos, I think, are not that productive. And in that sense, I think it's important to also include newer and younger voices in these track twos, which would reflect the demographic realities of the region. On the issue of SARC, yeah, it's true that I see it as something that's pretty much dormant. But my understanding, based on conversations with interlocutors around the region, is that many of the smaller states in South Asia continue to see value in it because it's one of the rare cases where all of the countries of South Asia come together as equals, even though India, of course, is the largest, most powerful country, and decision making is based on unanimity. So I think that indeed we've heard from some analysts from regions around countries around the region that it's something that we shouldn't completely rule out. I think that's an important point. My final point is that we've talked about great power competition and how that plays out in the region. And we also talk about how the current era is one of intensifying great power competition. But I think it's also important to sort of reflect on this idea of future conciliation prospects. There have been some indications in recent months of efforts to relax, at least if modestly, some aspects of this great power competition. So, we've seen in recent months, India and China have done a few things to suggest that they want to get along better. There was a border, of course, a border deal last year focused on patrolling that eased a lot of the tensions coming out of the Ladakh crisis. Um, President Trump has been, he's sort of signaled a desire to get along better with China than the case has been in previous years, and also the U.S.-Russia rivalry. Because President Trump takes a much more moderate view of Russia than his predecessors did, suggests that there could be some relaxing of tensions there. If these things happen, and it's a big if, interesting question to reflect on is what that might mean for South Asia, where you have for the most part governments that are not aligned and view this idea of intensifying great power competition playing out in their backyard in the neighborhood as a challenge because they're not aligned. They want to balance relations with all of the great powers. That becomes more difficult to do if that competition is intensifying. But if there's some indications that at least some aspects of this competition are easing, that could potentially be a net positive for these not aligned governments around the region. Again, that might be, I mean, maybe I'm being too sanguine and being too hypothetical, but I do think that even in this era of intense great power competition, we need to think about possibilities for, easing of some of those frenetic manifestations of competition and what that might mean for the region. This has been a wonderful experience, and thank you very much for including me.
Thank you, Michael. Subrata Saha.
Yeah,
Last
thank
word.
you. Thanks. Let me just, highlight a couple of points away from my part one, which was Spark-sponsored terrorism. I think the issue is, apart from this great power competition and all the other conflicts which are there, the issue is even for the United States, I think they find it very difficult to converge their commerce objectives with their military objectives and the State Department objectives as far as this region and as far as India is concerned. So that's my point number one. Point number two, when you look at it from the US military point of view, there is a long-term objective and then there are short-term issues. To put it more simply, it is the constant conflict between central command of US, their objectives to do with India and the region, and the Indo-Pacific command, their objectives to do with the region. That is also, there is a constant tension which is there between these two conflicts. So whether we like it or not, we have to navigate through these multiple conflicts of the US, as it were. The other issue is, when talking about this great power competition, I mean, the fact of the matter is, I don't see yet, and nobody can probably see it, the clarity which is there on who, if at all, is the first, rival or the top competitor for the US. Is it Russia or is it China? Like Ambassador Tariq used ding dong. We see that ding dong happening a little too often. And as far as India is concerned, more specifically, it is not so much about the great power competition or managing the two. The greater challenge is the China-Pakistan nexus that we are seeing in the entire range of relationships as they are, and the influence of the BRI. And somebody has already brought out this point, and I think it's very important that how we are able to get back our connectivity to its historical strength and take it forward within the region is going to determine how things are going to go into the future. Because even if we were to see the kind of statements Ambassador Tariq mentioned about when Yunus went to Beijing, what statement he made, and after that, when the political leaders from Nepal went to visit Yunus, they were in Bangladesh. There was some, very hypothetical kind of road connectivities being imagined between Nepal, Bangladesh, China, and so on in official statements. So I think there is a requirement for India, apart from BIMSTEC, apart from BBIM, to take the lead in these connectivity projects. That will put a lot of things to rest. Thank you.
Thank you. Apekshya.
Right, thank you, sir. It was I'm so glad to be part of this conversation today. I think there were such great insights. Just to sum up a few things that have already been discussed. I think for Nepal, talk about Nepal first. I think its internal vulnerabilities are of the most concerning factor for the government and for the public at large, because its own capacity to implement economic projects, infrastructure projects have not been that great, and the political instability. So there are a lot of internal challenges that Nepal faces that it has to deal with, coupled with the regional and global challenges that it has been pushed that is sort of it's confronted with. So in that context, I think it's a pity that there is a lack of regional organization, SARC, and even like limitations of BIMSTEC. That does pose a great challenge to smaller states like Nepal, because and I think Ambassador earlier made a very interesting point, how it's a pity that India could not see a benefit, like how India does not see how these regional initiatives could actually help everybody, including India. So definitely, I think the lack of regional organizations is going to be a very big issue in the coming days. But hopefully, like I think Michael also pointed out, that sometimes maybe we don't have to focus on the negative. Sometimes conflicts do bring out opportunities of cooperation also. And given the changing global landscape, I think countries like Nepal are forced to look into innovative ways to sort of look for options. And while there is a lack of regional organization, there's a huge geopolitical rivalry going on between not only its immediate neighbors, but also the larger traditional allies. Maybe Nepal might look into middle powers also. So I think this is going to be a very interesting time where, like, countries like Nepal will have to look for innovative policies, and maybe look beyond just geopolitical competition and see where they can sort of align their interests. I think I would just like to say that, and thank you so much for today. It was a great conversation. It was great listening to all of you.
Thank you, Apekshya. Shada? Shada?
Thanks, Pradeep. Yeah. So to come back to those points also, thanks. So track 2, taken part in thousands of track 2. I find them interesting to meet friends and colleagues, but frankly, I have not seen an impact in terms of change of policies. I think more effective is 1.5, where you have officials in the room as well. And additionally, I think having business in the room is important as well. I think younger people are very important to bring into the conversation, because the discussions I've been at have had former civil servants, former army people, and everybody just keeps repeating past talking points. So I find it rather ritualistic, and I have to say tedious. So I've dropped out from many of these conversations just because there's no time for that. Absolutely essential that there is people to people, and that we keep that side of things going, even if we're involved in the most sort of difficult geopolitical tensions, etc. SARC, I think for me, I have done a lot of work on ASEAN. I'm sort of known as one of the specialists on ASEAN. That's where we can learn from as South Asian countries, I think. For me, the crisis is basically poor leadership, and I do feel for the smaller countries in the region that are suffering because the two bigger countries can't bring themselves to sit at the same table and find out some way of modus vivendi. Especially if you had a functioning free trade, SAFTA, the big thing, I think it would really help the economies. I would stop cross-border smuggling, and I think it would bring revenues to both or all countries involved, and it would help South Asia to develop the supply chains that South Asia obviously lacks, even when compared to Africa. Obviously, there's a vested interest in the West, and let's be very cognizant of it, of keeping South Asia fragmented, because you sell more arms to countries that are at war. And we have seen just how important the defense industry is in today, how it is linked to the geopolitical tension. So we cannot minimize that. There's an interest in keeping India and Pakistan buying sophisticated weaponry. And finally, I'll give you an example of what just happened after Pahalgam. India sent a delegation to the EU, touring the West, came to the EU. Pakistan did exactly the same. There's a lot of to and fro interviews given here and there, different points of view, each one sort of selling hawking its own narratives. Nobody cared. Yes, it was interesting to hear what India was saying, interesting to hear what Pakistan was saying, but what a waste of money, what a waste of energy, and what a waste of opportunity to actually come together and show the world that actually South Asians are also capable of coming together in moments of geopolitical crisis rather than following old-fashioned templates as they've done in the past. So it was a lost opportunity, and I do regret it, but that also doesn't stand well for the image of South Asia in the rest of the world, and especially in the European Union, that despite all the differences that I have talked about, actually does come together at moments of crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Shada. With that, we come to an end. May I request Bipul, my colleague, to please propose a vote of thanks?
I think it was quite a rich discussion overall, and we have had different point of views, which is good. And as we are working in South Asia for a few decades, it is important for us to make note of all this. One major takeaway is the importance of connectivity, right? And as many of you have said that there's a lot of progress which we have made over the years. There are hiccups, roadblocks here and there. Those things will be there, but I hope that there will be progress in future in terms of not just physical connectivity or infrastructure connectivity, but also in terms of energy and people-to-people contact. Second major thing is that, see, security is supreme, security and sovereignty. So as long as we respect each other's sovereignty and security needs, I think things will move forward. And just to make a point that India has tried its best actually to keep SARC moving. And I don't want to go into the history, though I do agree with Ambassador Karim that we have to learn lessons from history, and we should not forget that. So I think BIMSTEC is the way forward, though I have no hesitation in saying that India is not taking the kind of lead that is expected of us. We are still a bit hesitant about regional cooperation. So with that, let me thank all of you. I will continue to have such webinars to hear or rather listen to your thoughts and see to it that we can make incremental progress in terms of regional cooperation. And I agree with Sada that 1.5 may be a better approach other than just having track 2, though track 2 also has its own values. So thank you very much, and let me stop here. Thank you. Over to you.
All right, it's over. And with that, let me also add to Bipul's thanks to all the panelists who spared their valuable time and to be with us at this event. And we hope that we are, as Bipul said, some incremental progress. But Shada's point, I agree with you entirely that 1.5 and younger participants rather than having the same. The only advantage Shada is with experienced people is that they bring in experience, which often young people lack, and they don't know what the gaps were and so on. So one cannot discount the value of retired people who have been there, have done it many times. And of course, the problem is that ritualism is something which is not to be run. But we do make efforts to have 1.5 dialogues, right, so that there is some impact. But by the way, our proceedings are led by policymakers very keenly. Let me tell you that, and we have at least in the region, and many governments read our papers very carefully. They do value our input very strongly. And we've got this feedback from them for many years. And having been in this business for 42 plus years, we have achieved a certain status in terms of conducting research as well as these kind of dialogues, which then feed into the policy making process. But as I said, one cannot expect change overnight, but at least there's a gradual change. With that, thank you very much, all, and have a good evening, good night, wherever you are.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Good night.
Bye.
Pleasure joining.
Thank you so much.